Hi, I'm Fred Easker, and these are my paintings and my images. There are paintings and there are some reproductions here. Everything that's framed is a reproduction, and everything that is unframed are original paintings. And I have different ones here at different times of the year. We've been up in Lansing for about 15 years, and I did landscapes around Cedar Rapids where we live full time. And I was getting interested in the landscape in this area, and so I kept coming up here, and then gradually we decided we would find a little place to locate here. We had a house here for a while, and about 6 years ago now we rented this space, and we have studios here and a place to exhibit our work. This is an area that we created to have an individual space here, away from the customers who come in, but a place that's kind of private and a comfortable place to work. I usually work with two sets of lights. I usually have fluorescent lights, and then I used to use incandescents, but now we're into LEDs, which there's a lot of, the light can do really funny things to painting, so that's kind of something I've been paying a lot of attention to. I've been painting the Iowa landscape for about 25 years, and this is my current painting that I'm working on. I've been working on it for about 6 weeks. And it demonstrates a lot of things that I'm interested in the landscape. One of the things I'm really interested in is the sense of space. And one of the reasons that we're up in Lansing is there's the wonderful vistas up here. And this particular scene, every one of my paintings is an actual place. And this particular scene is about maybe a half a mile west of Churchtown, which is about 15 miles from here. And it's a view that I've driven by many times, and I stop and photograph it, and it never quite comes out like what I can see there. And so I've photographed it many times over the years, and finally last year I found an image that I kind of liked, and so I then developed it into a painting. And this also sort of describes a lot of what I think about the Iowa landscape. Around Cedar Rapids, where I live, we have gently rolling Iowa land, and up here it's more exaggerated. And I think of these paintings a little bit as music. When you first look at these, you know, it's a nice calm image, but if you spend some time with it, you start to see lots of activity, lots of rolling hills and motion. And in this particular painting, I was thinking this morning that it sort of reminded me of the staff of a musical composition with these little trees almost are like the dots of music. The primary thing that I have to do left on this painting is the sky. Right now it's been roughed in. I've actually gone over it. This is the second layer, I guess it would be a good word to use. And I need to develop the clouds, and hopefully when I'm finished, these front clouds at the top will just kind of float in, have the sense of floating. And that will also enhance the sense of space, which is always a primary thing that I'm interested in. And then after that, I have a little bit of work to do in this area right here, adding some grass texture there. And then comes actually sort of the final part, and I sometimes call it polishing it. It'll be just spending a lot of time looking at every little detail and seeing if, what needs to be corrected, or sort of like a woodworker would keep sanding the wood surface till it gets a nice gloss. Well, it's that same sort of finish thing that I think ultimately makes the painting really interesting to look at. And I really like it when people spend time with it. And that in this painting, there's a lot of places that you can look and just visually explore and enjoy. I guess the other thing I would like to say that this composition is actually a composite of images that I took on the site, and I brought them back to my studio, and using my computer I kind of I join parts of them, I eliminate some things. The sky that day wasn't quite what I wanted, so I sort of imported another sky that I had in my files. And one of the things that people often say about my paintings is that they look like photographs. And I think that they really don't look like photographs. They're inspired by photographs. If you took a photograph of the same section, it would be entirely different because of all the brush strokes that are there And I think I try to develop a sense of space that usually you don't see in photographs. I thought I could talk a little bit about the notion of that sense of space that I was talking about earlier. Well, and one of the ways that you depict it is that things they're less focused, less sharp, and the color gets more washed out and more subtle. And I think the proper term is atmospheric perspective. And so you can see in this area there's a lot of white, and the colors are kind of faded and softened, but as you move in, then it gets a little bit less so. And then here in the foreground, this is maybe exaggerated a little bit, the color is very bright. And similarly, on these trees here are kind of soft, and you kind of sense that they're trees, but they're not really defined that well. But as you get closer, then here you can start to see individual trees, and that's one of the ways that you can create a sense of space. We could talk a little bit about the materials that I use. I use oil paints. Oil paints are pigments that are ground and mixed with an oil pigment. Usually, often there's like many of them, linseed oil or safflower oil, or there are others that artists use. And they come in tubes like this, and you just sort of squeeze them out a little bit, and then what my palette here is, I've been working on this area right here, and so I just pretty much just mixed up the colors that I'm going to be using in this area. One of the things I like about oil paint and working with oil colors is that you have this infinite variety and possibilities in terms of color. And like, there's no place on a canvas that I ever paint that I use the color that comes right out of the tube. Like, there's no area where I just use, this is cadmium yellow light. There's no place in there that I would just use that. And here's like 2 different yellows. And here I have 4 greens that are included in this painting. This is a cadmium green light. Here's a Prussian green, a chromium green, and this is a new green that I don't know the name of right now. Just a new one that I've tried. And all of these colors here are involved in mixing the greens that I use to put on the painting. And the other thing is, because I have this blue, this particular blue that I've used in the sky, which is a new color for me too. It's Severs blue, and it's a new color, and that this is the first time I've used it in a painting, and I've sort of used some of that blue into this green as well to help unify the painting, and then also to get some of the colors that I want. I wanted to talk a little bit about the brushes that I use. If you've seen the process video that's part of the tour, you'll see that when I start out, I use really rough brushes. Like, here's a kind of a large one, but I often use these. This is an old brush that's been, is really worn out, but it has enough paint that I can scrape it into the canvas to get the paint on, just to get the image roughed in. And then I often use brushes as big as this. This is just like a big paintbrush when I'm doing these large sky areas, and these kind of brushes. And then I sometimes use, this is actually a watercolor brush, but I use it to sometimes to smooth the transition to go where it's light and it gets darker as it goes up, and with a little different color. And I use that to sort of smooth that transition out to get a smoother look. And then I actually use this fan bristle brush that is in really bad shape. It's broken, and I can't find it where I can get a new one just like it. But that's sort of a final thing that just has these fine, it's called a fan brush, and it's just moves the paint a little bit to make it smooth. And then as I work on the details, I use a lot of smaller brushes from, here are some, this is about maybe a 1/4 of an inch wide, this one is maybe 3/8, and then I use a lot of these, this is like maybe 1/8 of an inch. So there's quite a variety of brushes that I use. And I don't use a lot of like really pointed brushes. I use, these are like flats, or they're called brights also. And I actually use them on the edges because it's wide this way, but if you turn it sideways, then it's just a real narrow brush, and it holds a lot of paint, and it seems to work well for me. One of the things that I'm often asked in when people visit my studio is, what is this board here? And actually, I call it a bridge, and I use it to have some place to rest my hand when I'm painting. And it just moves along the track up there, and I can put it where I want. And while I'm talking about that, one of the things that I really like about painting and the way I paint is that I really get into observing and replicating some of these shapes that I see in the photographs. It's almost meditative, and it's very pleasurable to me personally, and that sort of goes into the whole concept of the painting. This is a finished painting. It's called Iowa Road Creek, and it's kind of in opposition to the painting that we were looking at earlier. And one of the things it represents is, in all of my work, I'm really interested in the Iowa landscape. I really find it quite beautiful, but it's a little harder to find. And it's not always as spectacular as like here the images of the bluffs, or if you're in Colorado, you've got mountains and things like that. It's more subtle, and I really like finding quiet little Iowa places. And one of the things that you see a lot of in Iowa are these, I call them cut bank creeks. And I don't know, and this is not too far from where I live in Cedar Rapids. And I just like the gesture of that creek. That was kind of the inspiration for this particular painting. But it's a small focused area versus the large expanse of the painting that we were looking at earlier. This is a painting called Spring View from Balltown. And Balltown is a little bit north of Dubuque on the Mississippi. In the springtime, the oaks and all the trees along the bluffs, they have these beautiful colors they're kind of green-brown colors that I just find really fascinating. And when the light shines through them, it just sort of sparkles. Like most of my paintings, there's a lot of distance in this. There's the Mississippi River back there, and then also this kind of close oak tree that's in the front. So it's another way of creating distance by having smaller things in the back, things that appear small in the background, and then larger things in the foreground. When we opened our studio gallery about 6 years ago, we learned that visitors were interested in taking a bit of the experience home with them when they didn't feel that they could afford an original painting or a print, or didn't have space in their wall. So we started reproducing the painting on greeting cards. Well, thanks for visiting my studio. I hope you come and visit us here in Lansing. We're here the first 2 weekends of every month and the week in between. I hope you'll take the time to visit Fred Easker's studio, who also exhibits in this space.